Ladies and gentlemen, 7 Democrats, staffers linked to Stephen Colbert, producers, staffers, were arrested. Okay, for unlawful entry and trespassing. Now, that is the charge that the majority of people faced 2 years ago. And a congressional panel right now, a committee run by Cheney and Kinzinger and Democrats, Adam Schiff and others, have spent about a couple of weeks focusing on people who trespassed and who engaged in the criminal act of unlawful entry into our nation's most revered and storied building, or one of the most respected and revered institutions. Stephen Colbert says staffers arrested for trespassing at Capitol were guilty of first-degree puppetry. No, they were actually guilty of trespassing and unlawful entry, and they were there for about 5 hours or so, about 4 to 5 hours, without supervision. They didn't even have press credentials, and you have a situation where it's typical liberal hypocrisy, or liberal Democrat hypocrisy. They spent a long time talking about how you should respect and revere government buildings. And by the way, that summer, federal buildings were under siege by demonstrators. Now, this summer of $1 to $2 billion in property damage, 19 lives lost, 14,000 arrests according to Wikipedia. I understand, I agree, and I support the cause, why people were demonstrating. But you can't say that property damage or unlawful entry and criminal violations are okay in one context, but bad in another context. They're either bad or they're not bad. You can't be a hypocrite and spend 2 weeks condemning, judging, and pontificating when you have Hollywood celebrities now facing, or I should say staffers and producers for Hollywood celebrities facing the same exact charges. Most of the people in January were charged with trespassing. They weren't charged with a grandiose plot to undermine democracy. Quote, 7 crew members, including Mr. Smeagol, were arrested and charged with unlawful entry after being caught unescorted at 8:30 p.m. Thursday in the Longworth House building. Okay? And it really doesn't matter if they were just there for comedy or they were there to film a show. The issue is they were there unlawfully. We have no clue what they were doing. There are reports that they were banging on the doors of Lauren Boebert and Jim Jordan and Kevin McCarthy. And if you start banging on the doors of congresspeople, imagine how media would react or AOC would react if, God forbid, Fox News producers were banging on her door. No doubt it would be this, dramatic, oh my God, these Fox News producers are trying to make me relive what took place 2 years ago. Now it's Stephen Colbert saying, not that big of a deal. The problem, however, is that they were arrested, and there's an ongoing criminal investigation. That's the problem. There's an ongoing criminal investigation that Republicans just recently asked about in terms of information. They want information. There's an active criminal investigation going on. So you have to ask yourself a couple of questions. Who let them in? So it was about three different Democratic congresspeople. Adam Schiff and 2 others are accused of letting these people in. Adam Schiff is one of the congressmen condemning and judging Trump for his supporters doing the same thing. Now, again, they're going to try to sensationalize. What media does, they don't tell you that a lot of the people on that fateful day were actually allowed in. That's why there was an acquittal. They were actually allowed in by police, by policemen. And so, yes, of course, there were people engaged in criminal activity that I condemn, that you condemn. But if the rebuttal is, well, it's just puppetry, it was just fun and games. It's like, no. You don't understand. Stephen Colbert doesn't get it. He doesn't understand because he's immune. He's impervious to hypocrisy. He's a hypocrite. He tried to state that, well, the reason that they were arrested is because of what happened 2 years ago. No, that's not the case. You wouldn't have had to have experienced January of 2 years ago for these people to have been arrested. They would have been arrested at any point in time in the past 10 years or so, because there were issues at the Capitol even before 2 years ago. Okay, there were security issues. So if you are roaming around the halls of congressional offices and you're doing so without any approval, they didn't even have press credentials, and there's an active criminal investigation, sorry, Stephen Colbert is perhaps under criminal investigation also. Okay? His staffers and his producers face charges of unlawful entry and trespassing. Okay? The exact same time as the congressional committee. This is completely lost. Any wind behind their sails pertaining to the condemnation, the preaching, the judgment, and the sermons, and the grandstanding, and the soapbox, and getting on the soapbox and telling, the world how immoral and dishonorable. Oh, dishonor. It's like Liz Cheney talking about dishonor is like Jeffrey Dahmer talking about cooking tips. Or, how, somebody did something wrong on the Iron Chef. It's like, oh, well, there's a bigger issue here. It kind of gets to the old adage, well, how was the play? Other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? It's kind of like, well, there's a bigger story here, and it's actually people doing the exact same thing on your political side as you condemn from the other political side. See, morally superior Democrats, what they don't understand is that they simply can't, they always think they can just get away with the same activity or criminal behavior that they condemn others of committing, others in a political side. 14,000 arrests, 19 lives lost, $1 to $2 billion in property damage, and they don't bring it up. I wonder what Adam Kinzinger thinks of the 14,000 arrests and property damage of $1 to $2 billion and all the lives lost. I wonder, we don't know. Nobody has asked him. It's almost as if that summer didn't exist. And again, I support the cause, but I don't support the property damage. And anyone who says, well, it's just property, is like, well, it's not your property, is it? Okay, if it was your property, you would care. God forbid, if it was your life, you would care. And so there's an active criminal investigation. Stephen Colbert went on late night and said, oh, yeah, this was just it was only a big deal because of what happened 2 years ago. It's like they can't, Tim Pool, by the way, did a great segment on this today. They can't face reality. The reality is they were caught doing the exact same thing as supporters of the opposing political side were doing 2 years ago. Most of the people, there were no people charged under the greatest crimes that they're being accused of. There were people charged for trespassing and for unlawful entry. And these people, many of them are in prison now. And the staffers of Stephen Colbert are accused of banging on doors and who knows what else they were doing. Okay? But if they were trying to intimidate or mock or denigrate or, disparage in some manner Republican representatives while they didn't have credentials and while they shouldn't have been there, that's a big problem. And you can't just fall back and, it's just comedy. It's like, well, you know what? There's an ongoing committee now in a hearing where you have Democrats stating that people should go to prison for a long time because of what took place. And it's interesting to see how Stephen Colbert tries to flip the script. He simply cannot take responsibility for the criminal acts of his producers and staff. They committed crimes. Now, is this like the worst? These are the worst crimes in the world, crimes against humanity? No. Okay? But they committed the same crimes as the people who Colbert disparages. And again, it's impossible for Stephen Colbert to ever look in the mirror and say, oh, okay, wow, that he's a hypocrite. Impossible. Anyway, give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe. There's an active criminal investigation, and Jim Jordan and Republicans want more information because more criminal charges could be leveled, especially if we find out they did more things to Lauren Boebert's office and the offices of Republicans. Hit subscribe. I'll be back in a couple of hours before midnight.